The unbundling and privatization of Nigeria's power sector in 2013 targeted a competitive market that would attract private investment, promote efficient management of the sector, increase power generation, as well as provide a reliable and cost-effective power supply. But 8 years into privatization, only marginal improvement has been recorded in areas of increase in stored capacity for power generation, transmission, network expansion, and rollout of prepaid meters. While the sector still operates and fits and starts despite being privatized, the unending collapse of the national grid has added its woes to the myriads of challenges or worries experienced by Nigerians, whose lives and businesses are being affected by the poor state of power generation in the country, causing to lose billions of naira on diesel to power their generators. Following the instability in Nigeria's power supply, industry players and consumers want frontline political candidates to come up with workable strategies to provide remarkable improvements in electricity supply across the country. Joining me live via Zoom to look at this from Abuja is the former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Dr. Sam AMADI. Thank you so much for your time. It's good to have you join us on the show today.
Thank you. And thank you.
Yes, let's let Nigerians first understand what happens when we have a grid collapse and what is the process to restarting the equipment to make us get back to power. Tell us more about this process, how it happens and how it's restored.
Well, thank you. Many factors can cause the grid collapse. Basically, what it means is that the grids, it can be two types: total collapse or partial. Total collapse means that all the connections on that grid are out. So it could be, for example, that for whatever reason, there's a major trip on the transmission network, and therefore power could not be evacuated to the transmission to the discos to serve to customers. In that case, it means that it's like a tap where there's no more water. The tap stops, the water stops flowing to your tap. There's no line water in your house. Put it on. The water is not coming. Total outage. The source of supply that connects the water to your house is cut off, either because there is no water in the receptacle that supplies the estate, or something has blocked, or the pipe has cut off, and so water is wasting and not coming to you. In either case, you basically have zero supply of water. All the connections in that estate or in that premises. If it's partial grid collapse, it means that yes, the grid has collapsed, but some power is coming in, and maybe there's skeletal service. So, but what we've had the last 2020 January has been continuous collapse. In which case, for 1 day, 2 days, a few hours, system is totally out. Darkness either across the whole country or in many cases across the state, depending where the point of service, where each state or each zone connects to the grid, and if that point is disconnected totally, that's collapse. How do you restart? So we have what we call black start. The black start is a system in the generating companies that help them. Few of them have it. So you have like a wheel, the few others who have the capacity to restart for the sector again. So use a wheel, for example, when there's total collapse and it's rectified, then they will help you to start, just like a generator. So maybe you start one part of the you have a house that has separate generator, let's start collapse. So you start one. That one has used power, builds up, maybe 15 megawatts comes in, 20, 30. So over time, it keeps building up until the system is now back to peak performance. The problem is that not all distribution companies, or not all generating companies have their turbine ready or fitted with the capacity to what you call started, black start. So it's black because it starts from zero and then they pick up the load. Over time, the power comes back. So we have blackout, you need to restart. And restarting, we mean picking the load gradually, 1 megawatt, start 20. That's why you see some place are restored, and then maybe it takes a couple of minutes and hours before the insurance companies can fully restore service to all their service points.
At expected investment in infrastructure after the privatization process, what is your assessment of what we have on ground?
Well, we're not seeing major investments, and probably that's why the federal government had a Siemens project to help to stimulate the network and transmission. And the reason is very obvious. There are three issues here. One is, first, the asset holders, those who won the bids, needed to bring in a lot more money. The original design of the transaction is that they will buy the assets. That means the discos and the generating companies, they will buy with their own money. So let's say you are TVC power company, you buy a win. You're going to use your $150 or $250 million, their own assets, their own money to buy. Then you're going to borrow an equivalent of, let's say, $100 million to improve the network. What happened was that these investors, almost 100% for the assets which borrowed for. So they went to the banks, got money, and what that means that they're not able to borrow a lot more because they are maxed up. There's a limit to how much you can borrow with their assets guarantees they used to underwrite the borrowing. So this sector is not able to access funds for the fact that they are over-leveraged. Second, the sector is not also very financially viable in terms of return on investment. So tariffs issues are there. Again, change management. These companies are not able to recover money, cover their customers, and pay for service delivery, and therefore be creditworthy. So we see the generating companies not able to pay gas because the discos are not remitting their money. The company is not paying for guaranteed funds, and therefore the gas owners are selling to other industries. There's not enough gas to buy. So this lack of financial viability arising from the lack of recovery by discos and payment of debts by market stakeholders means that you don't have ready funds, either funds from the market earnings or borrowings to finance major improvements that will help to ensure better power supply and, of course, incentivize customers to pay higher tariff and to pay more regularly. So everything circles back to lack of capacity to improve the network and lack of capacity to borrow money. And so it compounds. The network is bad, therefore your losses are high, therefore your financial viability is low, therefore you don't have capacity to borrow more because your books don't spare investors, and so it circles back and becomes a vicious circle. So that's why we're seeing low investment, the level of expected investment from the investors themselves to improve their network, expand capacity, and over time, drop the tariff price and enhance profitability is not happening.
Interesting stuff. But before now, we had this agreement with Siemens Power project collaboration that's to improve, of course, is to improve supply. What do you think, or what's the update with regards to this, and what positives do you think can come from this agreement?
Well, on paper, it's a good plan. I mean, basically, the idea of this is to do what the investors cannot do by providing those technology investment funds and improvement in network for able to at least immediate to medium improvement. But the problem is, these are all predicated on a lot of factors. One is efficiency in project management, and that's where this market is not strong at all. We've moved from government or public sector monopoly, but we have not moved away from the inefficiencies of project management. So even though I don't have all the details, but my sense of following the sector is that we've not seen that plan translate to on-ground improvement in significant sense. So So we are still having, I mean, if there's an improvement, why are we having this high frequency of outages? In the last, since 2022, I'm hearing from some account, depending on what account has collapsed, we've had up to 10 to 15 or 12, collapse for just half of the year. So essentially, that plan has not been properly delivered. And if it's been operationalized properly, we're not seeing the result because inefficiencies that it's supposed to address is not fully addressed or even secret addressed. And one can argue there should be a time lag where we begin to see maybe the full significance of that agreement, that partnership with CMS. But so far, we can say that that plan is not resulting in any significant improvement in the power sector.
From a revenue perspective, let's talk a bit about that. How do we begin to deal more strategically with the DISCOs, GENCOs, and others? They keep talking about revenue shortfalls, what's it called, cost-reflective tariff, and all of that. How do we address this?
Well, the debate around tariff oftentimes obscures the real crisis in the sector. And yes, we need to have cost-reflective tariff because that's what the law says, and that's how the market can move. But look, if you measure our tariff today and back to 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when we left NERC, you've seen that the tariff has gone up. Really, the tariff is not that bad. It's not terrible. This goes working with NERC, increasing tariffs with that much publicity, that much noise, and customers probably complain because the service quality has not improved to match tariff increase. So if you ask me, the major crisis in this sector is not tariff increase. Tariffs are average. If you look at the West African tariff structure, when we started in 2010, 11, we are bottom, at the very bottom. That means countries like Togo, Nigeria, all of them had far more cost-reflective tariff than Nigeria. Over the years, we have moved up to above average. That means we are in the middle. We are almost getting to, we've left the bottom, past the middle, and somewhere slightly above the middle in terms of the ranking of tariff per kilowatt hour across the sub-region and in Africa. So we've been able to manage to push the tariffs close to average cost. But the problem has been that we've not been able to manage the losses. So the DISCOs and particularly are losing money. Not just because the tariffs are not cost reflective, but also that they are not even able to recover from customers, to collect rather the revenue that those tariffs benchmark for them and can secure. And secondly, the financial management in the sector, the utilities, still very poor. When we were there, we did a snap audit. We said that some DISCOs were overspending. They're not spending according to regulatory due process. And then, of course, in the short to medium term, your solution to improvement is to fund expansion. And then in the medium to long term, you recover. But this market, because of the hot money that hot money was used to procure this asset, the investors are expecting short return, quick recovery. And that doesn't work. It's a mismatch in the power sector where investments are long time. So they need to bring in money and then recover over 10, 20. And as long as the regulator is prepared to allow them to do those recovery over the time, the reasonable time span, that's not a problem. So I would say that the first problem sector and the most fundamental is to restore credibility, pricing, service delivery, and then capacity to finance the long term and recover in the long term. Not to finance long term and recover in the short term. That would be a mismatch.
On this note, now, how big of an economic agenda do you see power and infrastructure development form the core of this whole political season ahead of next year's election? And what should the electorate be looking out for in the nation's power sector blueprint?
I think they should be looking for which of the candidates for the office of the president and governors have a better plan of delivering power, not just in terms of megawatts. We have to talk about 50, 40,000 megawatts. We should move away from those megawatts and then look at a pathway to overcoming the constraints, the hindrances, the structural crises that feed into the inefficiency. So we should be looking at how do we move away from politicizing the power sector and then get back to basically thinking the policy in the NERC, the Nigerian Electric Power Policy. This policy, over 21 years now, policy was designed in an era of neoliberal market orthodoxy, where so much focus was on get private finance and solve the problem. Now we know from experience that privatizing is not going to guarantee you, automatically improvement. You needed to deal with the structural macroeconomic crisis, deal with the public sector capacity, improve the public sector capacity, because you need the public sector to align with the private sector to drive improvement in the value chain. So we want to see the political manifesto that's really grounded in the diagnostics of the real problem, and that kind of amends and reviews the policy framework. I use that policy framework to articulate new roadmaps that really is not fanciful and ideological, but really focus on dealing with the real crisis of the sector that informs some of the major failures we've seen since 2013 when this sector was fully privatized.
Good one with you. Thank you so much. I've been speaking to Dr. Sam AMADI, who is a former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Thank you for insight into issues surrounding the power sector. We hope to have you on the show sometime again soon. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.